Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic show. This is episode 430. Yes, folks, the shows are just flying by. And I've got a really great guest. He's a friend of the show in general. He's been on my other show a couple of times. He's always welcome on our roundtable show. And that's Jason Resnick. Jason, would you like to quickly introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers?
Sure. Thank you for having me. As you said, my name's Jason. Res online with 3 Z's, by the way. And I've been running my own web development business and email marketing automation business now for 9+ years, almost a decade by myself. Just helping my customers get more customers and create raving fans and grow their businesses. But I also, recent time, the past year and a half, I've been helping other developers and designers essentially do the same thing, be able to realize what their dreams were, what their aspirations were when they started their own business. So I do that through coaching and the Feast community.
Yeah, we'll be talking about a number of sectors with Jason. He's enormously knowledgeable, and I'm sure you're going to get some value from this discussion. And also got my great co-host, Adrian. Adrian, would you like to introduce yourself to the new listeners and viewers?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Adrian. I'm the CEO and founder of Groundhog. We produce sales and marketing automation tools as plugins for businesses that primarily use WordPress as their website builder of choice.
That's great. And before we go into the main part of the show, I'd like to mention one of our major sponsors, and that's Kinster Hosting. And what is Kinster Hosting? Well, they only host WordPress websites. I personally feel they're one of the best hosting providers in the WordPress hosting environment. They host the WP-Tonic website. They've been doing that for almost 2 years, and it's been flawless. If I have had a minor issue, I just go on to chat, and I'm speaking to a dedicated professional that really knows WordPress and knows what they're talking about. So there's no messing about. There's no being passed to somebody higher up in the food chain. The problem's just dealt with. And they host all their websites on Google Cloud Platform. It's some of the best technology in the world. What you get from Kinster is a great UX design, back-end design with all the features that you're looking for, staging site, one-click backup, latest versions of PHP. I could go on, but they've got some of the latest, best technology available. And as I said before, the other factor is you get some of the best support on the market 24/7. And when you have a problem, especially if you've got a membership site, WooCommerce, i.e. you're making decent money from your website, you need good hosting. So if that sounds really great, go over to kinster.com, have a look what they've got to offer, and I suggest that you should sign up. And if you do that, please mention that you heard about them on the WP-Tonic podcast. Right, Jason, I think our listeners and viewers have got feedback. They like to know a bit about the history of the person that we're talking to. Can you give us a quick synopsis how you got into the crazy world of WordPress development?
Yeah, obviously, I mean, it's what I've built my business on, and it didn't happen overnight, obviously, but I started out really as, essentially, I worked full-time for a consultant firm during the dot-com explosion, late 90s, early 2000s, and I got a taste of all different types of technologies. I was a developer. I did Java development, Ruby development, PHP development, .NET, a whole plethora, basically whatever the startup needed that my company put me in a seat of, I had to learn it, right? And so I got a good taste of all these various different technologies that I loved, or loved and hated, depending on which one it was. But for me, it gave me the knowledge and experience to say, which technology would fit well to provide a good solution to a business's problem. And when the whole thing fell in on itself, because this consulting firm essentially put their eggs all in the advertising bucket, and so all of those companies fell in on themselves, I was laid off. They basically didn't need. We were as big as 2,400 people, and by the time I was laid off, there was only 400 people left in the company. And this was over a span of 2.5 years. So massive growth and massive shrinking, right all in one very short period of time. And I said, hey, I have a skill. I know how to do these things. I can make websites. So let me try. And this was in early 2000s. And 18 months in, I found myself sitting at a desk at a design firm working full time again for myself, because I didn't know of all of the other things, of the business end of things, and really just how to manage clients. Fast forward to 2010, I left the design agency world for my own business now. And I struggled again because I was doing a lot of different things. I was doing Ruby on Rails projects. I was doing Java development. I was doing custom PHP work. I was doing all of these various things. And at about 2 years into that, I said, I'm burned out. Like, I can't do this anymore. Mm-hmm. And I had literally just got engaged to my then girlfriend at the time, now my wife, and just a month prior. And I said to her, I'm going to have to go back and get a full-time job. Maybe this isn't for me. I don't know what to do here. And she looked at me, and she's the rock in the relationship. She wants the consistency. She's not the gambler or risk taker. And she said, but that's not what you want, and we'll figure that out. And I was just like, wait, what? Like, the person that you're going to spend the rest of your life with, you just told them not to get a job. And I was just like, okay, so if she has the belief or faith in me to do this, then I got to figure it out myself. And so I really just analyzed my business from top to bottom, people who I worked with, personalities and all that. And what I found was what the problem that I was solving for my clients was giving them a solution where at that time, it was really just being able to manage a website, not be in the whole ecosystem every single day, maybe once a week, twice a month, those sort of things, but be able to make it super simple for them and be able to be flexible and robust enough to customize it to fit the business that they need. And so while I was rolling my own CMSs in Ruby on Rails and all the rest of it, I landed it on WordPress. And I planted my flag and said, hey, WordPress, WooCommerce at the time, because I was doing a lot of e-commerce work. I just said, hey, I'm just going to go all in. Anybody else wants anything else, I'm just going to say no to. So I went all in on WordPress. I leveraged WooCommerce, which lucky for me, I picked the right one at the time, because at that time they had all of them were out there. WP-Ecommerce, there's a whole bunch of other ones out there. But I just said, hey, WooCommerce, WordPress. And that was the first time I really specialized my business. And I saw the burnout go away, the stress go away. The decisions for me to take on or not take on clients became almost easier at that point, because while I could do those other things, I just said no, because I was able to then define the solution and help my customers or my leads be able to get realize the goals that they wanted to.
That's great. Over to you, Adrian.
So a big part of your transition, you'd say, from moving into just kind of like the jack of all trades kind of deal, where you're just basically taking whatever comes your way, the big transition into establishing, somewhere where you're happy and you feel fulfilled in what you do is really that planting that flag somewhere. So would you say that's right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing is we all, as creative professionals, whether you're a designer, developer, we want to please everybody. It's just, that's how I felt. Like, I've experienced that just in talking with all of these people over the past 15, 20 plus years. So for us to say, yeah, this project's not quite a fit for me, but yeah, I could still do it, right? Like, I could do it and I could put a value to it and I could put a price on it and things of that nature. That's not how you run a business. Just because you can do it, it's not something that you should be doing. And so I just figured out that what I do for my clients, and this was through communication with my existing clients. That's how I figured out exactly what I do, and why they like to be with me and why they like to stay on and actually pay their monthly fee. So that I learned that, and I just turned that back around and said, hey, if I'm doing this for other people, then there are other people in the market that also need this, and I can help them too.
Right. So for someone who's probably because I can't tell you the amount of times that I've run into the exact same situation. You know, someone comes up to me and they want all of this stuff. And in the back of, in the back of our minds, we're thinking, maybe that's not the best idea. I don't really want to do that. It would be easier to just do it this way. But that person is like, they've got the horse blindfold on, or what are those things called, Jonathan? Do you know?
Blinders.
Yeah.
They're called blind. They got the blinders on, and they can't see any other way forward. How do you deal with that? Because obviously, as the one who's actually getting the check at the end of the day, and we're looking at our rent bill, and we're like, that has to be paid. How do you circumvent that? Is there a strategy that you have in order to communicate with the people that come to you with those requests, or do you just basically draw the line and say, hey, listen, that's not something I'm willing to do?
Yeah, for me, it's all about what the problem is. So I always take it a step back. If they come at me with certain technology, like you're saying, the solution, for me, I have to approach it like a doctor. Yes, you may show up and you say, I have poison ivy on my arm because I was out gardening over the weekend. Now I have this rash. Okay, the doctor's going to take that, and that's a symptom. But the doctor's still going to do some analysis and diagnostics to figure out if it is poison ivy or something worse or something less, right? And so that's what essentially my sales process is really just to take that as a symptom of their problem. And I dive deeper into their problem. What is it about this technology? Why does this project matter now? Why is it important now and not 6 months from now or 6 months prior? And so I just dive in and I change the conversation from the tech, that they're looking at, to what the bigger picture is. And it's usually not anything related to the technology. And you just have to really just be a little bit more in control of the conversation, if you will, at those initial stages for those people that really do have those blinders on. But if then it gets to a point where they just keep circling back, even though that I'm asking them all these other questions, they keep circling back to the technology. Well, for me, that's a red flag number one, right? It's
fair enough.
And I have 2 red flags. I've learned over the years, if there's 2 red flags, we don't do any work together. And so if that red flag there is a signal to me, then I just say, hey, look, there are way more cost-effective options than me out there that could implement this for you. And it's
Totally
just
screw it up.
right? Basically but I say to them, I say, you could do that. You're just looking for somebody to go into your account or write some code or whatever it is that you want to do. Why are we having this conversation? I basically try to get them to tell me no. Right. And so that's usually when that happens. 9 times out of 10, I would say, well, I don't know. Like they get a little almost taken aback because I'm actually telling them to get lost in a way, right? Like I'm telling them, like, I'm not good match for you. So maybe we shouldn't even be having this conversation. I don't want to waste your time. And so a lot of times that's really the context of that conversation initially, is really to get the overarching picture of why we're even engaged in the first place and the importance of the project overall.
Right. Brilliant. Jonathan?
I don't know if you can agree with this. I'm fascinated to get your point of view on this, Jason, but any kind of medium to large project where the client is not prepared to pay for paid pre-investigation, paid discovery, obviously they get a free half-hour, 1 hour consultation from me, but then if it's a medium to large project and they haven't developed good enough documentation to either give a quote or really understand the full scope of the project, and then I require them to actually pay for paid discovery. And every time I've had a client that's not prepared to do it, and then I've decided to take them on, they've been a nightmare client and it's been a terrible project. Would you agree with that, Jace?
Absolutely. For me, at any time I go away from the process that I've defined, and my process has been defined iteratively over the past 9+ years. Anytime I go away from that, the project isn't as successful as it could be. It could either be a complete disaster, or it's just we're not as happy as we could be, right? And it's just because I sidestepped one thing or shortcutted. I said, hey, you don't need to fill out that form. I have a good enough idea of what your project looks like, or like yourself, like I need those discovery, scoping paid engagements sometimes because the client can't scope it out for me. And I have a half-hour sales call, and I tell them up front saying, if we can't figure out what that scope of work is on that sales call, then this is what it looks like next. It's going to cost X dollars. This is a discovery period. We're going to dive deep. I'm going to need a bunch of stuff from you. And so that they know that even before going into the sales call. So I'm really communicative up front with a lot of things. I asked the budget up front, whether they're honest or not on it, but at least I want to frame a lot of these things. And so, yeah, if I circumvent that initial paid discovery thing, like yourself, it never ends well. Like, it's just not a good fit most times. And sometimes it's the other way. I take on a client, it's a smaller project, and I probably should have done a paid discovery initially, because as we're working on the project, even though it's a smaller project, there's other things that just happen, right? It's like a bowl of spaghetti and you just keep pulling that one thread out. I'm like, oh my God, where is this all coming from? So it works both ways.
It's almost like go ahead.
No, I'm just going to go for a break, actually, Adrian. We're at about the 15, 16-minute mark. So, folks, we're going to go for a break. We're coming back. Going to have another great session with Jason. Obviously, I'm going to ask Jason about his consultancy, about I think he's got some courses that he has. I'm going to delve with Adrian's help into all that side. We'll be back in a few moments. That first session went quick, didn't it? Listeners and viewers, Jason's a great guest. I'm going to pass it over to Adrian because I think he had something in the first half, and I kind of interrupted him.
No worries. I just as a follow up to what Jason said, there's almost like a psychological trigger that when you have that process is lined out, and you, even if it's a small, or even if maybe they don't think that the process fits their personal case, making them go through the process keeps you in control of the conversation. And as long as you, the developer, the implementer, the creator, stays in control of the conversation, it just becomes so much easier to deliver on the deliverables that were agreed upon ahead of time, simply because psychologically the customer is aware that, even if they're not like consciously aware, there's that psychological thing that's like, hey, listen, we're going through my process and you've been going through it this far, and that's just not going to change. I just wanted to add that in to the tail end of that, because that's been my experience with the agency work as well. So I just wanted to add that point because I thought it might be valuable.
That's great. So, Jason, just to finish off our conversation in the first half, I've also had the opposite side, where I've had clients approach me with a very detailed document of scope, and it's obvious that they're just quote searching. They're just either they've made a decision with somebody, and they're either with a non-profit government entity, and they're having to get so many quotes, or they're looking for the cheapest. How do you deal with the opposite side, where you're hit with a very detailed scope document, but you get the feeling that they're not serious about engaging you?
I don't answer RFPs. That's it.
Oh, as simple as that.
If it's an RFP, it's somebody defined the scope without I don't have any context of that. So I can't give you a proposal on that. I can't give you a timeline. I can't give you a cost. I can't give you any of the details to, even scope out what the functionality is going to be. So I've just decided that for me is a time waster.
Yeah, they've never worked out for me either. So I totally agree with you. But it's hard, isn't it? Especially if it looks interesting. But you've got to be disciplined, haven't you, Jason?
Yeah, and that's why I say I don't do RFPs. If somebody says, hey, I have an RFP for you, or there is that detailed scope, I say, that's good. So whoever gave you that, go with them. That's it.
I think that's excellent advice. Now, you've gone into the coaching area, and am I correct? You're also running some courses. Is that correct, or have I got that completely wrong?
Yeah, I mean, it's a sort of a course, if you will. I look at it more of like an academy, really, because what happens is and it wasn't something that I had planned. It was more just I kept getting asked a lot of different questions, and people were asking, hey, do you do coaching? Do you have anything that tells us how to do the things that you do? A lot of it came off of the back of 2014, 2015, people were asking, how are you charging what you charge per month? And when there's folks like WP Curve charging $69. And so I said, well, I'm not WP Curve and I'm not doing support and backup and that. So I don't do any of that stuff. So it was a mindset where I had planted my flag in the WordPress space, but then people started aligning me to those spaces because I was doing recurring contracts, predictable income, those sort of things. Whereas people were either doing maintenance or they were doing large projects that were just one-offs. And so I was fitting myself kind of in between, and people were just asking how I was doing that. And once I got enough people asking about this thing, I said, well, maybe there's a way in which I can help people in a more formalized way. So I wound up building out Feast. And that's the coaching and community platform. So there's lessons, there's resources, there's 70 plus lessons and resources inside there. We do monthly roundup calls where I facilitate the community coming on, much like what we're doing here. And we just kind of talk and go over client situations and scenarios and, hey, what tool are you using for this and those sort of things. But also, I know that everybody's business is a unique snowflake, even though that it's really not. But the thing is when you find yourself online, there's a problem that you are looking to solve at that point in time, right? And so when somebody comes into Feast, we have an initial call, right? 15 minutes, a half hour, where I build out a custom syllabus. Yes, they can go to step one and go all the way through, but I could get them the quick win right away. So
that's fascinating. So you have this onboarding call, and then in your library, your resources that you've built up, you then can say, go to that part of the course, go to that, and that will give you the quickest resources
Absolutely.
for your major problem. That's fascinating. I love that.
Because people come in, they have problem with formalizing their sales pipeline. So I have several lessons on that. Some people want to know how to do cold and warm outreach right away. And so I have lessons on that. It's basically Feast is all of the resources and technology and methods that I've used to build my business. So as people hear and learn a little bit more about what I do and they want to do it because that's what people were asking, I decided to formalize it. And hey, I could put a framework around all of this, but I built Feast in the way that I wish I had a decade ago. And I've been a part of many different courses online, and you kind of just buy it and you're just like, you have to fend for yourself. And you're not even sure if anybody else is in this thing. Like you wonder if you stumbled upon some archive somewhere, right? But also, how can I best help and serve somebody that now is investing in their business so that they get the quick win, right? Like if you're struggling with your sales pipeline, you don't want to hear about how do I client onboard? How do I, to go through all these things? Who better than me to build out that custom syllabus, right? And so that's what somebody comes into Feast. And that's why I say it's more of an academy or a university, much more so than just a course.
Yeah, I've just got a comment on that before I throw it over to Adrian. Is that I think that's a great insight that you do this kind of initial onboarding call. And I think because the three main areas that we cover here is WordPress, e-learning, learning management systems, and marketing automation. And a lot of people are just totally they just want to automate everything, but the automation should really be there to give you the bandwidth so you can do some personalization. And what you've just said is so insightful, I feel. Over to you, Adrian.
So I'm actually just looking at your epic sales page.
Thank you.
res with 3z's.com/feast. And I want you to clarify a little bit of terminology for me. So you talk a lot about on this page about quote unquote predictable income. Mm-hmm. Now we have the many different revenue models. We have recurring revenue. We have big one-off project revenue. Define for us predictable income. That if someone were to go through your course, what does that mean to them?
It means building a sustainable revenue stream into your business. That could be recurring. It could be one-off projects that you can then spark word of mouth recommendations. The thing that I've always found, and through conversations as well as my own business, is that if you ask any service-based business what their biggest lead gen is, they're going to say word of mouth. And then I say, oh, okay, so what are you doing to spark that? Nothing. It's just happenstance. It just happens. So I've built systems in my business that spark the inspiration for those word of mouth referrals. It sparks inspiration for testimonials, those sort of things. And so a lot of that is how I've built predictable income into my business, because I know that by doing these sort of things that I'm going to get a certain number of leads into my business every single month that comes from that. And so that for me has built the predictable income that I need. Yes, there's one-off projects. Yes, there's recurring retainers. It's just a matter of preference as far as your business model, what you want. But you can also, I've never spent one ad dollar on my services business, not one. So and some people can't even say that for a business that they've just started, right? And I'm 9+ years doing this. So for me, it's important to build a sustainable business, but in order to get that sustainability, you need that predictability. So I use that word predictable because recurring revenue, people just automatically go right to SaaS and they go to some sort of mindset there. So when I say predictable, it could be a SaaS, could be retainers, it could be one-off projects. It's just a matter of what your model is and building out those systems to then go ahead and build that predictable income revenue stream.
It's all about how to enable the income versus the actual methodology itself.
Exactly.
Awesome. Jonathan?
Well, we come to the end of the podcast part of the show, folks. Hopefully Jazz is agreeable to stay on for some bonus content, which you can see on you can see the whole interview with the bonus content, the quickest, on the WP-Tonic YouTube channel. I tend to post there the quickest. So if you can't wait to see some great insights from Jazz, that's the place to go to. So, Jazz, how can people find the best place to find more information about you and what you're up to?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Res, that's with 3 Z's, or res.com with 3 Z's as well.
And I highly recommend that you go over there because it's been a fascinating conversation so far. Adrian, how can people find out more about you and Groundhog?
You can head on over to groundhog with 2gs.io. The multiple letter ending seems to be popular on this episode. But if you require marketing automation, sales automation, or you're looking to just free up some time in terms of contact and communication with your list, then you can head on over to our website and download our free suite of plugins in order to be able to enable that on your WordPress website.
That's great. And if you really want to support the show and get great guests and great interviews, go over to iTunes and leave us a review. It really does help the show. And take a screenshot, send it to me. And probably at the end of the year, I'm going to be doing a special offer. And anybody that's given us a review, I'll probably send you a pre-Christmas gift. We'll be back next week with another great interview. We'll see you soon, folks. Bye. So building this academy and university, what are some of the things you've learned that surprised you during that process, that journey?
It's mostly the students. When I first built it, I had a Facebook group and I had a Slack channel, mainly because I just wanted to be wherever the person was comfortable with. I've since shut down the Facebook group and we just have Slack. And the reason why I shut down Facebook group is twofold. One, it was, yes, there were people that used it And I thought, hey, it's got the ubiquity and all the rest of it. So I'm not a huge fan of Facebook. To me, it's a rabbit hole and distractions and all the rest of it. And so that was one of the reasons was I want people to use Feast and join Feast to work on their business, not be distracted. And if you go onto Facebook, you're distracted by 8,000 other different things that Facebook wants you to pay attention to. And so going into that Facebook group was the opposite of the intention. So that was one reason. The second reason was because I was starting out, the Facebook group didn't have a huge amount of people in it, right? So it had some people. So it took a lot of stoking the fire, if you will, from me. But also other people were like, do I go into Facebook for this? Or do I go in Slack for this? Or how do I find this in my dashboard? So people were starting to be confused as to where things existed. And so I just eliminated one of the distractions, and that was one thing. So the students dictating essentially what they needed. Second thing is I had built out this whole website with a social aspect. You have a profile, you have, badges and all of these other things. Nobody used it. So it's like, okay, so what's the point, right? Like, so
I say that to all the people that come, I'm doing a project right now, and he's a pretty good client. It's pretty complicated. We're using Groundhog as well. He's paying me decent money, but he's built this whole course, but he has got substantial following in his industry sector. So it probably will all work out, and he's a pretty astute marketer. But we're building out some amazing functionality, and I think to myself, why didn't we keep this a little bit more simpler at the time and find out what the students actually use and want?
And that's what happened. I was just like, look, nobody cares. Nobody's posting. Like, I mean, the whole social aspect of like friending other people and all this other stuff. And I was just like, nobody's using this. Why do I have to support this technology? Like, there's no point in it. It's just
what Facebook is for.
Yeah, well, right. But that's the thing. I was just like, this is pointless. Like, I'm just going to, you know what? And I just used RCP to put a gateway in front of the lessons and all of the access there, and use Stripe and eliminate a lot of the complexities that all of that stuff brought. So the students dictated that again, right? And
can I ask you a quick question to just get your insight on this? I struggled to actually get people to comment or say anything about WP-Tonic, actually. But if I go to a word camp, Jace, and they hear my voice, I'm not kidding you, I must have 20 people in the word camp come to me and say, are you Jonathan Denwood from WP-Tonic? I listen to your show. I've been listening to your show for years. I love it. I don't even know who they are. They've never commented. They've never approached me. I find it bizarre, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's a podcast, and I struggle with it too. I mean, as a podcast host myself, it's hard to get people to change their context too, right? So like, you're listening in your car, you're listening on headbuds, earbuds at the gym or something like that. And while something resonates with you at that point in time, by the time you actually get back to your desk or some other way, all of that stuff's lost. But I mean, I had a similar experience too, because my first podcast was WP Dev Table, which was just hangout, and somebody at WordCamp New York, and it was outside the bathroom. It was a little awkward and whatever. And he goes, "Hey, are you Jason from WP Dev Table?" And I was just like, "What the? Okay, let's slow down a little bit," because it was my first interaction of like, hey, there's some people out here actually listening to this thing. So I mean, I love podcasting, and the context switch is always the hard thing to get anybody to sort of take action. It's tough, it's I guess it's the podcast host's biggest problem, if you will.
Yeah. I'm going off context a little bit. I just want to get back on and then throw over to Adrian. So I think that the two things we've learned is don't build out massive functionality because you don't know if the students are going to be using it. So the other factor, have you learned to modify the actual content? How long have you been running the actual academy really?
It's about a year and a half at this point.
Right. So have you learned, have you had to adapt the actual content from the input from the students in quite a major way?
Somewhat, not too much, because again, it's all about the transformation, what their problem is and what I can help them with, right? And so people graduate, right? Like, and I love when that happens, right? Because they came from point A and got to point B and they're good, right? And so I just look at it. I guess adapting to the content is just seeing and hearing what they're looking for. So I'm starting to introduce these virtual co-working sessions where you can just come on and it's just this accountability, right? Where you have visual, where we're all doing work. So it's kind of quiet, right? But it's just this accountability being in this space where there's not co-working. Like, I'm from New York, so co-working spaces are, you can throw a rock and hit one, right? But like, if you're in the Midwest or something, or some rural area where there's not as many of these things or none of these things, sometimes you go to a coffee shop or you go to some other place, a library or something like that. But the virtual co-working session allows then back channel to chat and ask some questions and things of that nature. And so just to alter a little bit, just to facilitate more of what the students are looking for is really where that comes from.
Over to you, Adrian.
I think I'm going to try and get in a last little bit of extreme value, and maybe this will be a little bit of a preview if anybody is interested in taking Jason's feast or joining Jason's feast community. So we ask this question actually a lot for people who join us and come from the development background, and that's how to get over the launch hump, as it were. You've been working with a client for a very, very, very long time, and the project just it's in that constant state of it's not good enough, it's not ready, and just getting it to launch. Do you have any insight or recommendations for anybody experiencing that right now to kick their client in the butt and say, let's just get it fucking out there?
Yeah, absolutely. It starts with the proposal and the scope of work, right? So you know what the end looks like, and everything hinges on the end, right? So for me, I basically say it's not based on launch, the final payment. It's based on when we end the scope of work. So I don't care whether we launch or not. If the work is done and the functionality is built, the design is built, everything is built, and it's delivered to you, that's when payment is done. And so if there's lag or, dragging of the feet or anything like that, while there's a penalty for me to not get paid because I'm dragging my feet, similarly, there's a penalty to the client if they are dragging their feet, meaning I build into proposals that say, look, if this is our timeline of things, then I need certain things from you by these dates. And if that doesn't happen, then you run the risk of getting your project backlogged on my schedule. And in order for you to come back onto the schedule, there is a penalty for that. So you're going to have to pay for that. And this is all built into the proposal right up front. So there's none of this dragging of the feet. There's none of this launch, anxiety or any of that sort of stuff. Because to be honest with you, I dealt with that too much when I first started my business. And I was like, this is just, it goes back to everything that I've learned. Every time I fail, quote unquote, I look at what happened and how can I fix that and put that back up front so that it doesn't happen again. So for me, it all starts with the scope of work and the proposal. And once everybody signs on that stuff, then there shouldn't be any dragging of the feet.
That and more strategies coming from Jason's feast program.
And that really kind of circles back to your decision, I feel, because as you've been talking, I just keep nodding my head because it's all stuff that I've gone through, and everything you've said, Jason, it seems totally spot on to me. It kind of circles back to specializing in one sector, because then you have a much better idea what a project, the time scale, there's duplication. But the problem is you get a lot of really, and I'm now more a principal of agency. Apart from the WP-Tonic website and one other website, I have people that work for me. But a lot of developer coders, they don't like the idea of just specializing in one sector, do they? Because they get bored. Part of them likes living on the edge, but it's not a great way of running a business, is it?
No, because there's no predictability, there's no sustainability, and there's no profitability. And if you want to run a business, you need those three things. And so, yes, I want to learn all the latest technologies. I'm a geek. I'm a developer. That's where my heart is. I always do that. Plenty of side projects for me to do that. But for my business, I focus in on one thing because, as I said at the top, that I was stressed out because you're working on one technology for 3 months, you work on another technology for another 3 months, then you come back to that first technology 6 months later or whatever it is, and then you're like, okay, well, there's a new version, there's new technology. You're just ramping up. You're always on this constant ramp up to get back to where it is. There's no referability to you either, other than, hey, here's the website guy, or here's the web design guy. There's people refer to me as the WooCommerce guy. I've been referred to as the drip guy, the ConvertKit guy, because those are the three platforms that I focused my business on for the past 7+ years. So the first 2 years I was jack of all trades, like Adrian said. It didn't work out, and most times it doesn't work out. And that's in part what I've learned over the years, is that every time I've niche down or specialized a part of my business, the business has grown. And you wouldn't think so, but there's plenty of people that I'd much rather work with customers that already are on platforms, because they're not going to upheave their essentially their systems, right? They're going to be on ConvertKit, they're going to be on Drip, they're going to be on WooCommerce. They're not going to go anywhere, at least in the point in time that it's actually working. I could come in there and help them grow that. And that's where my sweet spot is.
Well, I think we're in the conversation. Jason, you have to come back in the new year. I thought there's many areas we can discuss as well, I feel.
Sure.
It's been a great interview, Jason, and I just thank you for coming on and sharing your knowledge.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem. We're going to end it now, folks. We'll be back next week. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.